I ended up on a footbridge in Lansing at night and attempted suicide. So it's not that I didn't give up. I did give up, and it didn't work.
Hmm.
And in that space, it's an interesting. This is the first time I've really talked about it in a public venue. My wife knows about it, but no one else does except now 20,000 people. So, hello world. So when you get into that space, my experience there is it wasn't so much a feeling of helplessness, it's a feeling of acceptance. And I guess a metaphor is the easiest way for me to describe that. When your head gets into that space,
Right.
imagine that you're in a lake and you're swimming
Yeah.
and you're out in the middle of that lake, and then suddenly you forget how to swim. So it's not like a pool where you can hop and just grab onto something and say, all right, well, I need to catch my breath. You're just bobbing up and down in the lake, and you kind of go under the lake and you push yourself back up, and you go under the lake and you push yourself back up, but you're never really comfortable. And after a while, you still don't remember how to swim, but you say, like, is this really how I want to spend the rest of my life? Is just trying to keep my head above
Hmm.
water.
Hmm.
And all it takes is a snap moment of like the no, I don't want to do that, to make a terrible mistake. And thankfully mine didn't work out. There's no lasting impact from that. No one was hurt. Um, but it it was a wake up call to say that something's gotta change, and you gotta focus down. And so I disconnected from that crowd. I disconnected from that lifestyle. I threw myself into work, threw myself into school, threw myself into trying to keep a little side business hustle, which ended up being an IT company I ran for 16 years alive throughout that time, and turned the grades around and ended up on the dean's list a whole bunch of times, and uh, moved forward, I guess. So it wasn't, I guess I didn't not give up, but thankfully the way that I gave up didn't have long-standing repercussions.
Yeah. I mean, Ian, you you might have thought you were giving up, but the truth is, even though you failed in the attempt, you chose to say, and you just said it a minute ago, you articulated it beautifully. This is a turning point. This has to stop. And you made a choice, didn't you, to do the
Yep.
hard thing. And the hard thing is to fight your way through, to go to school and to learn and to do your side hustle. And, you know, the easiest thing to do was to remain a victim and say, I love your analogy. I'm bobbing up and down. And yeah, I might have tried to quit for a moment, but you realized from hitting that bottom moment in your life that I don't want to stay there. I don't want to give up. I want to live. You made a conscious choice to live. And what a brave thing to do. And then you said you threw yourself into to your school, and you threw yourself into your work. What 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 a great characteristic of a great leader. And even though you could have, as so many people do, you could have looked back and said, look what I've endured. Look what I didn't have. Look what happened from early on as a child, from being bullied all the way through school. You could have said, well, I'm going to remain a victim. I'm going to remain not taking responsibility for my own behavior. But even though all those things were against you, against all odds, you rose back, you bobbed up from the surface, from that water, from that lake, and you said, now you know what, I'm gonna swim.
Yep.
And it's an amazing story. That is an amazing story. I'm so proud of you, and thank you for your vulnerability and sharing it with, you know 20,000 of your closest friends. But I know that there's somebody that needs to hear that. I know right now there's somebody bobbing up and down, and just totally conflicted with life and confused and scared. And your testimony of your hard times and being willing to share so openly and authentically will make a difference. So I want to thank you for that. And congratulations on the Dean's List. I mean, what? It's amazing. Yeah. I mean,
it was cool. It didn't really sink in. I said, what's a dean's list? I didn't the the stunning amount of naivete around education and those platforms. First time I got a letter, I was like, does this mean I'm in trouble? Am I on a watch list? What is a dean's list?
right.
And so there I am using the primitive internet going, oh, well, cool. I achieved something. That's good. But the initial reaction was more of blind terror. Like, what did I do? I didn't get in any trouble this time. I just have been going to school and doing my work.
I love that. And I love that your dad came around at the end and said, "Hey, your behavior has proven to me that, you're going to do this." So that's a neat story as well.
Yeah, it's one of my more fond memories of him. My dad was a complicated guy, as everyone is, and the good cautionary tale I took, like, my dad, I think, was harder on himself than anyone else was,
Mm,
and that got in his own way sometimes. And he took his value from being a doctor first. And I'm a big fan of Arlen Sorensen from HTG and ConnectWise. And Arlen's one of Arlen's Arlenisms is that everybody exits from their business, and you get to, like, either you can exit vertically or you can exit horizontally, but you will leave that business.
that's right.
And my dad got sick 10 years ago. He got sick back in 2012, and he had a spinal fungal infection that turned into a 6-7 month hospital stay and a lot of stuff. And he ended up in a wheelchair, not because he was paralyzed, but because mobility challenges. And it correlated and happened at the same time. When he got sick, his practice had just sold to a hospital, and he essentially was forced into early retirement. Part of the impact of that infection was that his diagnostic brain went away, so it wouldn't have been safe for him to practice medicine, even though he knew here's how the body works and things like that. He couldn't safely practice. And his career was taken from him, as sometimes things are. It was out of his control to impact or affect. And because of that, he didn't recover, so he wasn't able to pivot away.
Mm,
And that lesson really kind of hit home over the course of the past decade of, you gotta make sure that you have something other than work. So where work was a very useful from 2000 to 2010, 2012, work was a comfort, school was a comfort, things like
yeah.
that. And even from 2010 to 2018, it was a focus point and a distraction and things like that. But now that my father's dead, it's a very good thing. I look at the first 60 years of his life where he seemed happy and focused and driven, and then I look at the last 10, and it almost wiped out the first 60 because of the depression and the malaise and the lack of being willing to do anything with any sort of intentionality, because he just wouldn't get out of his own head about not being a doctor. That was his value to the world in his mind, which is sad, because I didn't really care that he was a doctor. I cared that he was my dad.
Right. That's right. He couldn't get out of that identity of being a doctor, could he?
Yeah.
And I love that you are learning from that. It's a tragedy as you think about it, and so sad, but at the same time, you get to choose what you do with that. And here you go again, Ian, saying, I'm going to learn from hard things. Look, it's a pattern in your life. And even now, as we think about who you are, just, you turned it around, graduated with honors, but it didn't get easy. It hasn't been easy for you, and as you continue to go through life, you still had some, even after graduating, you had some hard things ahead of you still, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. And it was, it was, diving in and entrepreneurship is Carrie's fond, my wife's fond of calling it the island of lost toys and broken toys. And it really is. If you dive into entrepreneurship, usually there's some sort of challenge or struggle internally that manifests its way out in pursuit of business and creativity and saying, no, I'm gonna forge my own path. And I I think from my childhood and having to figure things out and being isolated and being alone, I naturally gravitated towards a career where I said, well, nobody's going to be able to push me around or tell me what to do if I own my own company.
Yeah.
And I was mistaken, because for one, the IRS can absolutely do that to you and has a tendency to in that
Right.
scenario. But you can see kind of the path from, hey, here's where these childhood or traumatic or influential shaping things can kind of stem and direct you forward. And running an IT company is not easy, especially these days with all the security stuff going on. I've got nothing for respect for people who've stayed in that game. I worked night and day, 12-hour days for about the first 7 or 8 years of my son's life. And it was 7 days a week and eventually shrank down to 6, but it was 6 days a week all throughout there. And through that work, we had financial success. We had newer cars and a bigger house and more stuff and all that type of thing. And so there was financial impact to our world, but I was not there for formative events, and I missed school events, and I missed soccer games, and the same thing that happened with my father happened with me. And it created a lot of tension in my previous marriage, and that marriage fell apart. And looking back at it, I ignored my ex-wife, I ignored my son, I didn't help around the house. Simple things like helping out with chores or volunteering or just showing some gratitude didn't happen because there was such a lack of, I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. And instead of having hard conversations or awkward conversations or trying to steer in and learn how to speak with my ex-wife, I just threw myself more and more into work. So much so that the marriage fell apart. And through the marriage falling apart, the thing about divorce is you have to divide up things, and businesses are assets. And because we couldn't communicate, and we have started to learn how to now, but we couldn't then, it went down to the bottom of an asset pit. And when you're down at that bottom of the asset pit, one of the options is, hey, maybe we just liquidate and sell everything. And I had to kind of spin in that cesspool for 2 to 3 months. And when you're in that space, part of where your brain goes is, okay, well, if you sell it, what's that going to look like? And that's how my brain worked, is let's game theory this out. What's it going to look like after you sell it? You're not going to be able to start another business. You're not going to want to work for some guy who just bought your business. That's not appealing. So you're not going to be an IT guy anymore. And what do you want to do? And at the end of that space, I had been introduced to a strategic planning methodology that we use to fix a lot of fundamental business problems. It was developed by Tom Patterson back in the 80s, called Stratop. Tom's dead now, but Stratop is it's a perspective-based planning tool, and I really enjoyed the times when we were working on business planning, and strategy was really interesting to me. I'd never been introduced to that in a formal way before learning about it through that peer group HTG and Israel Lang, who was my facilitator and a very influential person in the past 5-6 years of my life, even if he didn't know it. And when we were in the throes of that divorce, I had reached out to Patterson Center and said, hey, I think I want to get certified. At the time, I was thinking, well, hey, if I've got this certification, I can use that knowledge to better serve the IT company. And at the end of the divorce, I was back on that bridge is the easiest way to
Yeah.
describe that. I was in the
Yeah.
same mental state, and since I was there before, I recognized the risk and the danger, but I didn't know what legacy meant. I didn't know what the purpose of life was. I'm not a strong spiritual person personally. I don't have anything against that, but I wasn't. And I really didn't understand what I was doing. And so, as part of the certification process, the first thing they have you do is, hey, fly out to Denver and go through a personal strategic plan called a life plan. And like, come on out, we'll spend some time, we'll see if this looks good. And if it doesn't look good, we'll figure that out together in the room. If it does look good, we can take the next steps. And I went out there and met with a man named Michael. And Michael, when I met him, I said, hey, look, like, this is kind of what I've presented up until now. And I just got divorced 2 weeks ago, and I don't understand these things. And could we potentially fit this stuff in to explore this? And he said, we're not going to worry about anything else except that stuff for the next 2 days.
Wow.
And so we really dove in, and the two things that bubbled out of that is, one, I didn't want to be an IT guy anymore. I didn't want to own a tech company. I didn't want to work for a tech company. Technology was not my purpose. And the other piece of it is that I didn't want to be the guy. I wanted to be the guy's guy. So I didn't want to go do the things. I wanted to be someone who could help other entrepreneurs, other organizations, other leaders figure out what their vision was and how they might go about doing that, and support and coach and listen and teach and learn from and be involved with. But I didn't want to be doing the doing anymore. So I'd much rather be that support system and try to help people. Hey, how can we get from X to Y? Or how can we solve these problems, and help people come up with the plans and tools and resources to do that. And that led me on a journey to fast forward a year into 2021, and my wife and I were going for a walk, and she said, you know, you're still miserable at this tech company and you're not having any fun. And who says you have to sell your IT company and retire? Is that, you're all about challenging assumptions? Is that an assumption? Are you talking about something that's written in stone, or is it written in sand? And half a block later, she's still walking down the thing and turns around and says, you're catching flies back there. Are we coming for a walk? Are we going home? What are you doing? And that was it. I couldn't go back. I said, wow, I don't have to sell my business and retire. I can do something different. And so I did.
So what was that? What are you doing now? Bring us up to date.
Yeah, so Carrie and I founded Richardson and Richardson, which is a multidisciplinary business consultancy. And if you don't know what that is, good, because that's why we use those terms. But without any fluff in it, we help people plan on how to get from X to Y. And if they're having some pain in sales or marketing, kind of spreading the message about what they do and why it matters, we help them with that. And if there's an entrepreneur who's kind of struggling, I try to say, hey, can we meet one-on-one and figure out a plan, or give you some motivation and talk through some things. So there's a bit of coaching in there. There's strategy and planning and building out project plans and actions, and then quite a bit of sales and marketing support as well.
So did you sell your company? You sold your...
I sold my IT company at the end of last year to my brother, who had been there with me from the start. When I started the thing, I said, hey, there's going to be a lot of forms we got to sign and liability we got to take on. You want to do that? And he said, no, thank you, sir. I'll just take a paycheck. And he and I had a gentleman's accord from the beginning. Look, if I ever want to sell some or all of this, you get first right of refusal. And I went to him and I said, hey, would you like to buy it? Here's kind of what's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And are you interested? And he said, yeah, I'm interested. And we worked with a broker and found some financing, and he bought me out, and he owns it, and he's still running it today.
That's amazing. And you and your wife, Carrie, now have a new consulting type, for lack of a better word, coaching, consulting, helping, walking, mentoring. So are you enjoying what you're doing now?
It's night and day difference from what it was before. It doesn't really feel like work.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, obviously you're in a camper talking to me.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, what
I'm
more
working in my mobile office today.
Oh, Ian, this has been so good, so rich, so deep. Thank you so much for this. Can I ask you just a couple of more things?
Yeah.
And then I know our time is gone, but there are a lot of young leaders who are trying to figure it out. They've made mistakes. They have failures. They are searching. They're trying, or maybe they're just on that beginning stage of hey, what do I do? I know I want to do something. I want to be, I want to be like Ian. I want to be able to look into the future and turn the corner and work hard and accomplish something. What would you say to those aspiring young leaders that are listening to this podcast?
So I'm a big fan of threes. So I'd probably say three things. And the first one is, don't let what your perceived expectations that others have of you pigeonhole you. So just be true to yourself. Don't worry about what someone else is thinking about you, because more often than not, they're not. We're all just humans trying to get through things, but people aren't necessarily having malicious thoughts about you or saying, wow, he's really screwing up or he's doing a great job. Like, people are just trying to get by. They got their own load to carry. So stop worrying about what they're thinking about and start worrying about what you're thinking about.
Mm.
If you're not enjoying what you're doing, go do something else. Life's way too short to be miserable, especially with something like work. That's the majority of our time is spent in work. So if you're not enjoying it, and if it's feeling like a chore every day, then you shouldn't be doing it anymore. And I guess the second part of that is just go find your passion. And if you find something that you're passionate about, money will naturally follow, because that passion will attract people. They'll see how good you are at it. They'll see how much you enjoy it. They'll enjoy giving you the opportunity. And most people will say, well, of course you need to be paid. You need to be paid a fair wage for your labors and for your efforts, and you won't have a problem. It won't be such a big deal. Just say, yeah, well, here's what I would need to perform that, and they'll say yes. So
that's amazing. What great wisdom. And I hope you captured that if you're listening. Incredible wisdom from Ian. And so I have to ask finally, what's next? What are you doing next? Is ONR going to continue? What's on the horizon for you?
So I'm a big, I love business books because they resonate down, and I always get ideas and get creative. And I'm a fan of Jim Collins as an author, and all the work that he and his group of colleagues have put together. And one of the things that I learned from a Jim Collins book is the concept of the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And one of the things Carrie and I set was early on was a goal for R&R, which is, hey, we want to help entrepreneurs. So we've got a goal of, we want to fundamentally help 1,000 organizations, 1,000 entrepreneurs transform in the next 10 years. And if we do that, we think we'll have changed the world. So
say that goal one more time. You want to help
1,000 different entrepreneurs or organizations transform and achieve their vision in some meaningful way.
And how long did you give yourself? 10 years?
10 years.
Wow. That is a BHAG. Love it. I love visiting with you, Ian. You are amazing, and you are incredibly gifted in your thought processing and what you have accomplished and who you are. Thank you once again for your authenticity, your transparency. Thank you for making a difference, and you are doing that. I really appreciate your time and want you to know we value what you have said today. And thank you for being willing to share with us here on Crossing the Line.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure, and again, a privilege. And as a little aside, I've been a fan of yours for quite a while, so this is like meeting a movie star for me to be able to spend the time.
Listen, let me tell Robin, our producer, Rob, make sure my wife hears what he's saying, will you? Ian, thanks, my friend. We'll talk soon.
You.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Absolutely.